It began with a quiet Marine, a loyal K-9, and a woman in a racing wheelchair who carried the sky in her eyes. No one knew her past. No one knew her pain.
That's far enough,
until
kid.
5 college
You need to
boys
back off
decided
right
to turn
now.
her silence into their entertainment. But when her medals hit the floor, the truth rose louder than their laughter. And in that fragile moment, the diner became a
I understand
battlefield
your
where courage
reservations,
stood
but
taller
this
than
operation is
cruelty.
happening. We follow orders,
Then the impossible
regardless
happened.
of personal feelings.
The Air Force arrived,
When the missile
not with
hit,
sirens,
you didn't hesitate.
but with reverence for the pilot
You
who
steered
once
her clear of
protected
the
them all.
residential area, knowing full
What
well
followed
the risk.
wasn't revenge, but a lesson in dignity, forgiveness, and the kind of strength only survivors understand. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the Guardian Stories Ridge family. Caleb Rowan woke with that familiar heaviness in his chest, a weight that did not announce itself loudly, yet clung to him the way desert dust once clung to his uniform. The morning light pushing through the blinds felt muted, almost embarrassed to exist. He swung his legs over the edge of the mattress and rolled his shoulders, feeling the dull ache of old battles wake with him. For a brief moment he considered staying home, letting the world carry on without him. But isolation had a way of breeding darker thoughts, and too many mornings had been lost that way already. Atlas stood by the door, waiting with that patient vigilance only a 4-year-old German shepherd, trained as a K-9 and molded by years of instinct, could possess. His sable black and gray coat shimmered in the dim light, and the off-center patch of pale fur at his chest formed the shape of a broken arrow. His amber-brown eyes watched Caleb closely, not insistently, not demanding, just a quiet presence, a reminder that someone else existed in the room with him. "You're right," Caleb murmured, rubbing a hand over the dog's strong neck. "We should get out, before this place eats me alive." He pulled on his worn flannel shirt, gray and red plaid, soft from years of washing, layered over a black t-shirt. The flannel had once belonged to a friend in his platoon, and every time he wore it, the memory of that friend walked with him. Dark jeans, tactical coyote boots, and his old USMC cap completed him, giving a sense of armor to guard against a world he was no longer sure he fit inside. He had no real destination in mind. He simply drove, letting the quiet roads dictate his route. Eventually, he found himself in the parking lot of Mickey's Burger House, a small-town diner with aging red tiles, fogged windows, and a smell of frying onions that settled into the clothes of every customer who walked through the door. Caleb killed the engine. He wasn't hungry, but something about the thought of a warm drink and human voices, distant, not directed at him, felt grounding. Inside, the diner buzzed softly. Families murmured over early lunches. An elderly couple sat side by side sharing a plate of fries, and a teenage server wiped down the counter with motions that suggested sleep had been minimal. Nothing special, nothing unusual, exactly what Caleb had hoped for. Until he saw her. At first, she was just a silhouette beside the window, a slim woman in a dark Air Force t-shirt, light denim jeans, and sneakers that had seen better days. Her hair, a soft brown touched with honey, was tied loosely at the nape of her neck, though several strands had escaped to frame her pale face. But as she shifted slightly, Caleb noticed something else. The sleek carbon fiber racing wheelchair she sat in, its polished black frame catching the overhead lights like a quiet, stubborn star. She wasn't old, not fragile, but the posture she held, the rigid straightness, the careful control of every movement, told a story of someone who refused to be pitied even while drowning. He wasn't staring, not intentionally. He simply understood that kind of silence, the way a person could look out a window not to admire a view, but to avoid confronting the turbulence within. A small piece of paper slipped from her lap when the server placed a drink on her table. She didn't notice it fall. Caleb hesitated, but leaving it there felt wrong. So he rose from his seat, Atlas padding at his side with quiet pause, and approached. "Ma'am," he said softly, "you dropped this." She turned then, slowly, as though her mind had been far away, and Caleb caught his breath despite himself. Her eyes were blue, impossibly blue, but red-rimmed in a way that betrayed recent tears. Not dramatic tears, silent ones. She blinked once, twice. "Oh, thank you." Her voice was gentle, threaded with exhaustion. She clearly didn't want anyone to see. She reached for the paper, but he caught a glimpse of the header before letting go. A memorial slip, Air Force insignia, a name printed, then scratched out. Beneath it, a handwritten call sign, Halcyon. Caleb swallowed. He knew enough to understand that people only carried these slips when they were heading to a remembrance service or running from one. "I didn't mean to intrude," he said quietly. "You didn't." She gave a faint, brittle smile. "Just a rough day." He nodded. "I know the type." She looked as though she wanted to ask what he meant, but the question died behind her eyes. People with pain recognized each other without needing explanations. Atlas took a step closer and sat. And surprisingly, the woman didn't flinch at his size. Instead, her fingers twitched slightly, as if she were resisting an urge to comfort him or herself. "Beautiful dog," she murmured. "Atlas," Caleb said. 4 years old, retired K9. Explains the posture. Her smile was sadder now, but real. And for a moment, the diner seemed to hold its breath. Two strangers and a dog standing in a fragile, unexpected thread of connection neither of them had planned to find that day. Just as Caleb turned to walk back to his table, thinking this tiny exchange would be the first and last time he ever spoke to her, Atlas suddenly emitted a low, restless rumble. Not aggressive, not fearful, but uneasy. A sound Caleb had only heard a handful of times in the field. He stiffened, scanning the diner automatically. Nothing seemed wrong, nothing alarming. And yet Atlas's gaze was fixed on the entrance, unwavering. Caleb frowned, unsure whether to chalk it up to instinct or coincidence. He didn't realize, neither did she, that Atlas had sensed something coming long before the door even opened. Caleb returned to his seat, shaking off the chill that Atlas's behavior sent through him. But moments later, the diner's door slid open with a rush of cold air and a burst of loud laughter. 5 college-aged men swaggered inside with the confidence of people who had never been told no in their lives. They wore university hoodies, designer jeans, spotless sneakers, and thick cologne. The leader, tall, broad-shouldered, hair-styled in an undercut so shiny it looked lacquered, walked with a theatrical swing. His name, as the others soon addressed him, was Tyler Briggs. 20 years old. Expensive upbringing, careless habits, a certain deadness behind the arrogance in his brown eyes, as if he had never learned that empathy was part of being human. Atlas tensed. Caleb didn't look away. The group's volume pushed through the diner like smoke. Families stiffened. A mother pulled her daughter closer. Even the elderly couple who had been smiling minutes earlier sank into silence. Caleb tried to remain detached. But the moment Tyler's gaze found the woman by the window, her fragile stillness, her wheelchair, her attempt to stay invisible, Caleb felt something in him coil tight. He had seen far too many wolves choose the gentlest prey. Tyler made a comment, loud sharp, meant to draw attention. His friends laughed, looking around eagerly, waiting for affirmation. But the woman didn't look at them, didn't react. She simply turned a page in her book with steady, practiced calm. To Tyler, that was the worst insult possible. He slapped the back of a chair, dragging it toward her table. Caleb rose before he knew he was moving, his hands curling at his sides. Atlas stood too, muscles rigid. The woman lifted her eyes at last, her expression a mix of tiredness and warning. But beneath that, Caleb sensed something deeper. Not fear, not submission, just fatigue. The kind that came from fighting too many battles alone. And in that moment, Caleb knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would not let her fight this one alone. Before he stepped forward, before he opened his mouth, he whispered the only prayer he still remembered. Lord, if you need me to do something today, show me. Little did he know, the answer was already standing right in front of him. If this chapter moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Because sometimes God uses the smallest encounters to remind us that miracles still walk quietly among us. The sound of laughter shifted in the diner. Subtle at first, but enough to make the air tighten around the edges. Caleb Rowan remained still in his seat, jaw set, eyes tracking every movement like a man who had spent too many years learning to read danger by its smallest tremors. Atlas sat beside him, the dog's posture perfect. Alert, not aggressive, but ready. The 5 college students made themselves comfortable by making everyone else uncomfortable. Tyler Briggs, the ringleader in a spotless white hoodie, launched into jokes that weren't jokes at all. Sharp, mocking sounds meant to dominate the room. His friends circled him like lesser planets. Marcus, a lean kid with acne scars and a phone always raised, recording anything that could make him famous online. Jake, built like a high school quarterback who never learned humility. Connor, round-faced and eager to mirror whoever seemed strongest. And Brett, thin, jittery, eyes darting like he thrived on other people's unease. They started small. A mocking comment about the food, a fake gagging sound at the smell of frying oil. Then they shifted toward the staff, targeting a teenage cashier named Lily. A girl no more than 16, with curly brown hair tied in a messy bun, freckles across her nose, and a nervous smile that faded each time they spoke to her. "Hey, sweetheart," Tyler called loudly, snapping his fingers as if ordering a pet. "Smile more. You look like you're about to cry over burnt fries." Lily froze mid-step, her shoulders hunched, but she didn't say anything. She just moved away quickly, cheeks burning. Caleb felt a hot pulse in his temple. Typical bullies. They always searched for the smallest spark of fear. But then something shifted. Brett spotted Tessa Monroe by the window. Her profile looked stronger now that Caleb wasn't standing in front of her. The afternoon light highlighted the gentle curve of her jaw, the tension in her mouth, the calm determination she wore like a second skin. Her sleek, black racing wheelchair was impossible to ignore. The carbon frame seemed almost futuristic in the old diner. The small silver pilot wings pinned to her collar caught the light. So faint most would miss it, unless they were looking for details. The boys were definitely looking. "Dude," Brett whispered, nudging Tyler. "Check this out." Tyler's grin sharpened. "Well now, that's interesting." They crossed the restaurant with lazy confidence, like they owned the place. Caleb watched them go. Every muscle in his back tightened. He tried to stay grounded, but old instincts clawed at him like ghosts waking up. Tessa didn't flinch when the boys approached. She simply closed her book with deliberate calm, though her eyes never left the window. Her fingers rested lightly on the side of her wheelchair. Steady, prepared. "Hey there," Tyler said loudly, planting himself too close. "Nice wheels. You in a race or something?" His friends snickered, leaning around him like hyenas circling fresh meat. Tessa finally turned her head, giving him a gentle but exhausted look. "Just trying to enjoy my lunch." "Oh, she talks," Marcus announced, phone raised and recording. "Say hi to the internet, everyone." Caleb's nails dug into his palms. The laughter got louder, the mocking sharper. Jake pretended to limp dramatically, mimicking Tessa's legs. Connor made engine noises and tapped her chair like testing a vehicle. Tyler leaned down, his face a mixture of amusement and disdain. "You know," he said, tilting his head, "pretty girl like you shouldn't hide behind all this." He motioned to the wheelchair as if it were an inconvenience to him personally. "What happened? Bad fall or just born unlucky?" Tessa inhaled slowly, her chest rising with painful restraint. Her voice, when it came, was calm, a calm forged from 1,000 moments worse than this. "You don't know me," she said softly, "and you don't need to." Brett laughed loudly. "She's feisty. You sure you didn't used to run track or something before? Whatever?" Marcus leaned in closer, phone still aimed at her face. "Tell us your tragic story. People love that stuff." A shadow crossed Tessa's expression. Quick, fragile, but unmistakable. The kind of shadow that spoke of fire, wreckage, and screams over a radio signal. She swallowed thickly. Caleb knew that swallow. He had lived it too many times. He rose from his seat but forced himself to pause. Stepping in too early would escalate things. He wanted to be sure, needed to be sure. As he hesitated, Atlas looked up at him, the dog's amber eyes full of tension, not fear, recognition. Then Tyler made the mistake that broke the stillness. He reached out and flicked the small silver pilot wings pinned to Tessa's collar. The metal clinked sharply. A tiny sound, but devastating. Tessa flinched, not visibly, but inwardly, the way a person recoils from an old wound reopening. Caleb felt something inside him snap, but before he could take a step, Atlas suddenly lunged, not forward, not to attack, but to place his body between Caleb and the aisle. His muscles were rigid, his ears pinned back, and a low, trembling growl vibrated deep in his throat. It wasn't directed at the boys. It was directed at Caleb, as if warning him, as if begging him to think. Caleb froze, stunned. Atlas had only done that once before, on a day Caleb almost made a choice he wouldn't have come back from. Was this a warning? Or a sign? For a heartbeat, the diner didn't feel like a diner at all. It felt like a pause in time, like something greater was watching, waiting to see what Caleb would become next. The moment broke when Tyler grabbed the handles of Tessa's wheelchair and nudged it backward just an inch, but enough to shake her balance. "Hey," Tyler said in mock sympathy. "Careful now. Don't want you rolling away on us." The diner gasped. Even customers who had tried to stay uninvolved stiffened. Lily, the young cashier, abandoned her station and hurried forward. "Sir, please, just leave her alone." Tyler didn't even look at her. "Relax, we're just having fun." The way he said fun made Caleb's blood run cold. That was it. Caleb stepped forward, voice deep and steady. "Enough." The room hushed instantly. Tyler turned, smirking. "Look who's talking. Grandpa with his dog." Caleb kept walking. Atlas matched his steps, silent, controlled, but eyes burning. "You need to walk away," Caleb said, tone calm but unyielding. "Right now." The boys exchanged looks, confused by how someone could sound so calm and so dangerous at the same time. Tyler folded his arms. Or what? Caleb didn't blink. Or you're going to learn something about respect you should have learned a long time ago. The air tightened. Even Tessa, shaken but composed, stared at him with something like dawning hope, or fear he would get hurt because of her. For a moment, everything hung in the balance. The bully's arrogance, the Marine's restraint, the pilot's pain, and the dog's trembling loyalty. Whatever happened next, none of them would leave unchanged. If moments of courage and grace speak to your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe. Because sometimes God uses ordinary people to remind us that miracles happen in the shadows. The shove was harder than anyone expected. It wasn't the kind of force meant to injure, just the careless power of a young man who had never been taught the weight of his own actions. But for someone sitting in a lightweight carbon fiber wheelchair, even a careless push was enough to send the world tilting. Tessa Monroe's chair struck the edge of the table with a sharp metallic snap. Her drink toppled, ice scattering across the surface before crashing to the floor in a cold splash. She gasped, not from pain, but from the shock of losing control, the one thing she spent every day trying to maintain. And then came the sound. A soft clatter. A box hitting tile, a lid springing open. Caleb Rowan froze mid-stride. Because something small, palm-sized, magnetic, had slipped from beneath Tessa's wheelchair frame and fallen open like a wound revealing itself. Several objects spilled out in a shimmering scatter. Ribbons, medals, commendations. Not trinkets, not souvenirs. Honors earned under fire. An air medal glinted under fluorescent light. A purple heart, its violet surface shimmering with unspoken agony. And the unmistakable cross-shaped silhouette of a distinguished flying cross, so rare it stole the breath of anyone who understood it. The diner went silent. Even the kitchen stopped, fryers humming quietly like anxious breathing. Tessa's face drained of color. She reached down quickly, hands trembling, trying to gather the medals before anyone processed what they were seeing. But the moment she leaned forward, something else fell out. A small rectangular placard, laminated from age with military fonts no civilian could mistake. Caleb reached it at the same time she did. Their fingers brushed the edge of the card. He read it before she could hide it. Captain Tessa Monroe, United States Air Force F-16 Fighting Falcon. Call sign, Halcyon. Caleb felt his throat tighten. He didn't breathe for a moment, not because of the rank, not because of the aircraft, but because of the call sign, Halcyon. He had heard it before, once, years ago, spoken by Marines who had survived only because a pilot stayed in the air long after her plane should have fallen apart. He looked up slowly. Her eyes met his, and in them he saw a storm carefully caged. Shame, pain, grief, years of holding too much inside. But beneath all of that, a fire that someone had tried hard to extinguish. Tyler Briggs, the ringleader, blinked down at the medals, confusion scrunching his brow. What even is that? His voice wavered. The bravado began to crack, revealing something under it, ignorance mixed with dawning fear. Brett swallowed. Dude, those look real. Marcus stopped recording. Even Jake, the fake athlete who mocked Tessa earlier, took a step back as if metals could burn through the soles of his shoes. But Caleb didn't look at them. He knelt, slowly, deliberately, not as a man rescuing someone weaker, but as a Marine honoring another. Warrior. He picked up the Purple Heart first. Its weight in his hand brought memories he spent years trying to silence. Blood in the sand, radio static before a friend's last breath. The hollow silence afterward. This woman had bled. Then he lifted the Distinguished Flying Cross. Very few were ever awarded, even fewer to pilots who survived. This woman had saved lives. Tessa tried to take it from him, but her hands shook too violently. "Please give them. Please, just give them back." Her voice cracked at the edges. Desperation, not pride. She wanted to disappear, wanted the floor to split in half and swallow her whole. Being mocked was one thing. Being exposed was another. Caleb placed the medal gently in her palm. "Captain," he said quietly, the title slipping naturally. "You don't need to hide these." Her eyes widened. She hadn't expected him to recognize her rank, or the significance of each medal, or the call sign. And for a moment, just a flicker, she saw something in him too. A man who understood loss the way she did, who carried ghosts the way she carried scars. Men with empty eyes recognized each other. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I don't deserve them." Caleb shook his head once, firmly. That's never true for people who say it. Tyler watched the exchange, confused, embarrassed, suddenly aware the situation had spiraled far beyond his childish attempt at dominance. "What's the big deal?" he muttered. "They're just medals." Caleb's eyes snapped toward him with a force that made the younger man flinch. "They're not," Caleb said. "They're stories written in pain. They're the cost of saving people you'll never meet." Marcus lowered his phone entirely now, guilt coloring his face. Connor avoided eye contact altogether. Jake's voice trembled. She's Air Force?" Tessa closed her hand over the medals, her knuckles white. Not anymore. Caleb felt something inside him break at the way she said it. Quiet, defeated, like the words themselves weighed more than the medals combined. He wanted to ask, what happened? Why was she alone? Why did she cry before coming here? What brought her to this small diner in the middle of nowhere? But he didn't ask, because he understood something sacred had fallen at their feet. And everyone in the diner felt it too. As Caleb helped her gather the last medal, Atlas suddenly stepped closer, not to growl, not to guard, but to gently press the side of his head against Tessa's knee. Tessa froze. Atlas didn't comfort strangers, ever. Not unless something in them mirrored something in him, fear, loss, or a wound deeper than the body. And when Tessa reached out and touched the dog's head, her fingers trembled as though she were touching a memory instead of fur. For a moment, something holy passed between them, an unspoken recognition, a shared fracture. Caleb felt it like a whisper from somewhere. Higher, these two were meant to meet. Caleb gathered the last of the medals, placing them back into the small open box. When he handed it to her, he kept his eyes steady, soft, but resolute. "You're Captain Monroe," he said quietly. "Halcyon." Tessa looked away, blinking hard. "I was." Tyler swallowed hard. "Wait, you're a pilot?" His voice was barely audible. Tessa didn't answer. She didn't need to, because the diner already knew. Caleb straightened. Atlas moved closer at his side, tail still and eyes sharp. The medals were no longer scattered, but the truth they exposed hung above them like a charged storm. This moment would split the day in half. Before, after. And nothing would return to the way it was. If this story touched you, please like, comment, and subscribe, because sometimes God lets the truth fall at our feet so we can finally see the miracles standing among us. The diner felt split in half, one side filled with people frozen in shock, the other with 5 boys suddenly realizing they had stepped into something far deeper than they understood. But Tyler Briggs didn't process depth well. He processed attention. And right now, all eyes were on him. His pride swelled like a bruise. "Look at this," he barked, lifting his phone as though he had found something amusing. "Purple hearts, flying medals. She's like, what? A pretend pilot? Stole these off eBay?" His voice cracked slightly on the last word, revealing a sliver of insecurity beneath the arrogance. But he pushed through it, volume rising. "Come on, smile," he taunted Tessa. "Let's get a good shot for the internet. War hero in a wheelchair, caught faking medals at a burger joint. That'll go viral." The cruel words hung with a sting that made the diners look away in shame. Caleb Rowan couldn't look away. He stepped forward, not a dramatic movement, not a military stomp, just a quiet, steady walk, the stride of a man who had spent most of his life measured in decisions rather than noise. His voice, when it came, was low and even. "Turn the phone off." Tyler looked up, blinking at the tone rather than the words. "What?" Caleb continued walking, his boots whispering against the tile. "You heard me?" Jake scoffed. "Dude, it's just some old guy." But the closer Caleb came, the more details became visible. The squared shoulders under a faded flannel, the steady calm in storm-gray eyes, the Marine's posture that even years of civilian life could not scrub away. His presence carried something weighty, an authority earned somewhere far from the safe walls of college dorms and frat parties. Marcus lowered his phone without meaning to. Caleb stopped between the boys and Tessa, placing himself just slightly ahead of her wheelchair as though shielding her from a blast he knew was coming. "You're done," he said quietly. "Back away." Tyler forced a laugh. "Dude, relax. This doesn't concern you." Caleb tilted his head, jaw tightening. "It does now." The boys exchanged uncertain glances. Brett muttered something that sounded like, "Why is he so calm?" But no one responded. Tessa swallowed hard. She tried to straighten, tried to find her voice, but her emotions tangled in a knot. From shame, from the medals, from the past she didn't want exposed in a fast food restaurant. Caleb didn't look back at her, but she felt his steadiness like a shield she hadn't asked for yet desperately needed. Tyler jabbed a thumb toward her medals. "Man, you don't even know her. She's pretending." That was when Caleb finally let some steel into his voice. "She's flown in places you wouldn't have the courage to take a step," he said. The diner went still. The words were not loud. They weren't shouted or dramatic, but they cut through the air with the precision of a laser-guided round, landing so sharply that several customers gasped. For the first time since the boys entered, people looked at Caleb with genuine respect. Not for the size of him or the way he squared his shoulders, but for the calm certainty of someone speaking truth without fear. Tyler's face flushed an angry red. "Oh yeah? And who are you? Captain America? You're just some middle-aged wannabe hero trying to impress a girl." Caleb smiled faintly, not amused, but saddened. "Son, I stopped needing to impress anyone a long time ago." Jake sneered. "You think we're scared just because you talk tough?" "No," Caleb said simply. "I think you're scared because, for the first time today, someone saw right through you." The word stung. Tyler stepped forward, aggression rising in desperation. "You want to go outside? Let's go, hero." Caleb didn't flinch. "You don't want that." Marcus tugged Tyler's sleeve subtly. "Dude, maybe chill." But Tyler jerked his arm away. "Shut up. I'm not scared of some vet with a dog." As if summoned by the word alone, the bell on the diner door jingled, soft, innocent, but carrying the weight of something important. Atlas entered. The German shepherd stepped through the doorway with controlled confidence. His sable black and gray fur glowed under the overhead light. The patch of pale fur at his chest formed the shape of a broken arrow, unique, recognizable. His ears were up, his tail level, movements fluid and silent like a trained soldier checking an unfamiliar battlefield. Caleb blinked in surprise. "Atlas." I left the truck open. The dog ignored him, walking straight toward the tension, his eyes sharp, reading the air like a map. He didn't growl, he didn't bark, he didn't bare his teeth. He simply stood beside Caleb, placing himself between his human and the threat. Tessa's breath caught. She had seen trained dogs before. She had seen courage in canines more than once. But something about Atlas, the way he positioned himself like he had done this 1,000 times before, made the hairs on her arms rise. Tyler tried to act unimpressed. "Oh, look, a dog. Scary." But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Jake whispered, "That thing looks like it eats fear for breakfast." Caleb rested a hand on Atlas's back. "He's not here to scare you. He's here because he knows when things are about to go bad." Tessa watched the scene unfold with a strange mixture of fear and awe. The Marine, the dog, the medals. Every piece felt like destiny winding itself around her, even though she didn't believe in destiny anymore. She believed in physics, in engines, in tactical decisions and survival odds. But this felt different. Atlas suddenly shifted, not toward Tyler or the boys, but toward Tessa. He pressed his head gently against her knee again, exactly as he had when the medals fell. But this time, he whined softly, a trembling, emotional sound that only a dog who recognized someone's hidden suffering would make. Tessa stiffened, her eyes widened, because in that moment, she felt something impossible. Not pain, not fear, but the unmistakable sense that this animal could see her wound, the one no one else could see. Not the one in her legs, but the one in her heart. Caleb looked at Atlas in confusion. The dog had never done this twice, not for anyone. A few customers murmured in wonder, as if witnessing something spiritual. For a moment, it felt like God himself had touched the room. Then the moment passed. But something in Tessa had changed forever. Tyler tried regaining control of the situation, but the gravity of Caleb and Atlas standing together was too much. The diners began shifting subtly toward Caleb, silent support building around him. Standing up to bullies is contagious. "You need to walk away," Caleb said again, but this time there was no gentleness left, only truth. Tyler's jaw worked as though searching for one last insult, but he found none. His friends had already begun backing away. Brett muttered something about leaving. Connor stared at the floor. Marcus, phone now pocketed, whispered, "Let's just go, man." But humiliation is a powerful poison. Tyler shoved Marcus aside and pointed a shaking finger at Caleb. "This isn't over." "It is," Caleb replied. "Right now." Tyler hesitated. His bravado crumbled. His shoulders sank. And slowly, very slowly, he stepped back. The tension in the diner broke like a snapped wire. Atlas exhaled through his nose, shoulders relaxing. Caleb didn't celebrate. He simply breathed. Tessa stared at him, realizing she had just seen a man step into a storm without needing thunder to prove his strength. Whatever happened next, the day would never be the same for any of them. If this moment of courage touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe. Because sometimes God sends the right people at the right time, and miracles follow those who stand up for what's right. For a long moment after Tyler Briggs backed away, the diner floated in a strange, suspended quiet, like the moment after an explosion, when no one is sure whether the danger has passed or merely changed shape. Customers held their breaths. The air buzzed with tension, disbelief, and something else entirely. Respect. Quiet, growing, and directed toward one woman in a carbon fiber wheelchair, and the Marine who stepped between her and cruelty. But nothing ever truly stops in a place like Mickey's Burger House. Life continues living its small, ordinary routines, even in the shadow of extraordinary moments. In the far corner, unnoticed till now, sat a teenage busboy named Eli Porter, 17 years old, thin as a rail, with messy, dark blonde hair that stuck out in all directions and a pair of wire-framed glasses constantly sliding down his nose. He was shy, quiet, the kind of kid who apologized even when someone else bumped into him. But he had a vigilant way of observing the room, the kind of awareness born from growing up with a father deployed overseas for most of his childhood. When Tyler shoved Tessa and the medals spilled, Eli's heart had jumped into his throat. Instinctively, he'd lifted his phone, not to post online, not to chase views, but because he knew what a moment of injustice looked like, and because he trusted one person to know what to do. His older brother, Aaron Porter, 33, an Air Force crew chief stationed at the nearby base. Aaron was broad-shouldered, with sandy ginger hair, a close-cropped beard, and freckles across skin, weathered by sun and jet fuel. Known for his steady nature, Aaron had spent his life fixing engines and protecting his younger brother from the things their alcoholic stepfather didn't bother to hide. Eli typed only one line as he sent the video clip. "Aaron, she needs help. Now." He didn't expect anything to happen quickly. Bases were busy. Calls were screened. Military schedules didn't bend to the whims of teenagers. But some names traveled faster than orders, and Captain Tessa Monroe was one of them. 15 minutes later, the ground in the parking lot trembled with the low hum of engines. Caleb heard it first, an instinctive way his brain cataloged vehicles the way other men memorized songs. Atlas's ears perked. The dog turned toward the window, tail rigid, posture shifting into a stance Caleb had seen only in theaters of war. Through the glass, lights appeared. No sirens, no flashing colors, just a coordinated line of pickup trucks and SUVs, the type issued to personnel on base. Each vehicle bore the subtle license plate code of the Air Force installation 15 miles away. Caleb's brows drew together. That's a lot of government plates. Tessa stiffened. What are they doing here? Her voice trembled. Not from fear, but from something deeper. Another wound scraped open. Former pilots didn't like being found. Not after falling from the sky in ways most people couldn't imagine. The diner door opened, and the world seemed to step aside. The first man through looked like the kind of person Storms hesitated to argue with. Colonel James Archer, 47, tall and severe, with dark hair streaked in dignified silver, and eyes that had seen both triumph and tragedy. Wearing a navy bomber jacket over a gray shirt and tactical black boots, he carried himself with the exact posture of a commanding officer addressing a runway full of fighter jets. Behind him came technicians with grease-stained hands, pilots in casual shirts but unmistakable posture, ground crew members with close-cropped hair and calm military bearing. There were nearly 20 of them. But the diner door kept swinging, and more filled the entrance. Caleb didn't know these people. He'd never met them in his military life. He didn't need to. He recognized the quiet thunder in their arrival, the same thunder he once heard when Marines gathered around one of their own. These weren't customers. These were guardians. The group parted subtly as Colonel Archer walked through the aisle. His face softened, just barely, when his eyes landed on Tessa. "Captain Monroe," he said, voice low and reverent. You should have called us. Tessa swallowed. Her fingers curled tightly around the medals she hadn't yet returned to their box. I didn't want to be a burden. Archer shook his head slowly. You were never a burden. Behind him, a wiry woman with jet black hair and a long braid stepped forward. She wore a dark blue hoodie, jeans, and boots, but her posture spoke of cockpits and adrenaline. This was Major Evelyn Shaw, 38, one of Tessa's former wingmates. Her eyes were steel blue, sharp enough to cut through excuses. Her left wrist bore a fading tattoo of an F-16 silhouette. Tessa, she said quietly, you shouldn't be alone. Tessa looked away, blinking rapidly as emotions warred behind her eyes. Caleb watched the exchange with a kind of reverent confusion. He had seen loyalty among Marines. He hadn't witnessed this flavor of devotion among pilots. Fire forged in the sky, sealed in loss. The Air Force personnel gradually formed a wide semicircle around Tessa's wheelchair, not trapping her, not cornering her, but protecting her. The silence between them felt sacred, a kind of reverence born from shared danger and shared grief. Atlas took a step forward, not toward Caleb, not toward the boys, but toward Colonel Archer. The dog stared up at him with an intensity Caleb had seen only a handful of times. Archer froze. The wrinkles around his eyes deepened, not with fear, but with recognition. He looked at Atlas the way a man looks at a message he didn't expect, but somehow prayed for. How? He whispered. Tessa frowned. Sir? Archer didn't finish his sentence. Instead, he reached out with slow reverence and placed a hand on Atlas's head. The dog closed his eyes. For a moment, only a heartbeat, the diner held a breath that felt strangely divine. Some people seek signs. Some receive them. And some, like Archer just then, find them standing right in front of them, wrapped in fur and loyalty. The spell broke when Brett accidentally knocked his phone off the table, startling everyone. The clatter echoed loudly in the quiet diner. The Air Force personnel turned, not aggressively, but with the unity of people accustomed to reacting as one. Tyler sank into himself, deflated, cheeks blotchy with a cocktail of shame and fear. We didn't know. Archer's gaze cut through him like wind shear. Because you didn't care to know. Tyler's mouth closed with a snap. Major Evelyn Shaw stepped forward, her tone clipped but controlled. Captain Monroe flew cover for our squadron for 5 years. She saved lives you'll never have to count, and you put your hands on her. Tyler flinched. Archer knelt, kneeling to no one except the woman before him, and picked up the last medal still on the floor. He placed it gently in Tessa's hands. You didn't lose your wings, Captain, he said. You earned every feather. Tessa bit her lip, tears finally slipping free. No one mocked her. No one recorded her. The quiet dignity of the Air Force filled every corner of the room, like a tide washing away cruelty. Caleb stood a respectful distance away, watching her reclaim a piece of herself. He felt no jealousy, no exclusion, only a deep, wordless gratitude that she wasn't alone anymore, because some wounds required more than one guardian. Archer finally rose, placing a steadying hand on Tessa's shoulder. Let's get you home, Captain. Tessa looked up, not at Archer, not at the others, but at Caleb. Only if he comes too, she said softly. A strange warmth spread in Caleb's chest. He nodded once, and Atlas simply wagged his tail. If this moment of redemption touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe. Because God often sends help in ways we never expect. And sometimes the miracle arrives with the sound of quiet footsteps. The diner had settled into an uneasy silence. The kind that doesn't arrive after a fight, but before an understanding. Air Force personnel stood around Captain Tessa Monroe in a respectful half-circle, an unspoken shield against the cruelty that had bruised the room earlier. The last customers had abandoned their meals altogether, as if eating in the presence of dignity felt wrong. Caleb Rowan stood with his hands resting on his hips, jaw set, eyes softer now. Not with pity, but recognition. Colonel James Archer was the one who stepped forward. The dim afternoon light spilled from the windows, carving sharp planes across his face, revealing the scars of command. Lines deepened not by age, but by decisions that wore down even the strongest. His bomber jacket shifted as he turned toward the group of students, who had retreated into a tight cluster near the wall. Their arrogance had fled, leaving behind pale cheeks, trembling hands, and boys trying to look like men, but failing. Archer spoke quietly, but his voice carried the weight of skies torn open by combat jets. "Before you walk out of here thinking this was just a heated moment," he said, "there is something you need to understand about the woman you mocked." Tessa stiffened. "Sir," he lifted a hand gently, "you deserve the truth to be seen, Captain, even when it hurts." He turned back to the boys. "Her name is Captain Tessa Monroe, F-16 pilot, call sign Halcyon. She is the reason 34 American soldiers made it home from the Ghazni Valley 3 years ago." A murmur rippled through the diner. Archer continued, voice steady. "Her jet was hit, avionics failing. But she stayed in the air for 17 minutes. 17! Flying on backup controls and raw instinct, because pulling out early would have left a platoon pinned beneath enemy fire." Tessa's fingers curled around her armrest. She never liked hearing her story told by others. It exposed the places she had stitched herself back together. Archer's jaw clenched. By the time the rescue team arrived, she'd lost half her hydraulic power. When her bird finally hit ground, the impact crushed the lower frame of the cockpit. That's how she lost the use of her legs. The students stared at the floor. The youngest of them, Brett, bit down on his lips so hard it turned white. Tyler, the one who had pushed her, seemed to shrink with every word. His undercut hair, once slick with bravado, now hung limp with fear and shame. Caleb remained silent, though his throat tightened. The story echoed something familiar, a sacrifice he understood far too well. Loss had a taste, and once a man had swallowed it, he could never forget. Archer took a slow breath, grounding himself. She was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. Purple Heart, Air Medals, not because she sought recognition, but because she stood between death and people she never met. Tessa shook her head, eyes hardening. "Sir, that is enough." Archer paused. He knew that tone. The tone of a warrior who had already relived the worst day of her life too many times. But Tessa didn't turn to the boys with anger or pride. She looked at them as if seeing past their cruelty into the hollow space of their youth, into the ignorance that had made them cruel. "You don't need to know my past to treat me like a human being," she said softly. Her voice didn't tremble. It broke something open instead. Brett wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his hoodie. Tyler's shoulders folded inward as if gravity itself had turned against him. The other boys exchanged devastated looks, none daring to speak. Caleb bowed his head. Something in her words struck deeper than any reprimand could have. They carried the truth he lived by. Respect had never needed a resume. At her side, Atlas gently pressed his head against her leg rest. The German shepherd's sable black and gray coat shimmered under the fluorescent lights. His bright, off-center chest patch, the shape of a broken arrow, rose and fell with each steady breath. He wasn't growling anymore. He was comforting. His amber-brown eyes held the fragile calm of a creature who could sense pain long before humans admitted it. Atlas suddenly lifted his head. Not sharply, not like a threat, more like a question. He stared directly at Tyler. The room froze. For a breathless second, it looked as if the dog saw something beyond the boy's shaking frame. Something no one else could see. His ears dipped back, and instead of baring his teeth, Atlas did the unexpected. He walked forward and nudged Tyler's hand with a gentle touch. Tyler's face crumpled. "Why would he?" the boy whispered. Caleb watched, stunned. "He knows when someone's telling the truth," he murmured, "or when someone's hurting. A beat, or when someone needs grace more than punishment." The diner seemed to inhale again, the spell breaking just enough to let light back in. Tyler swallowed thickly and looked at Tessa. I'm sorry," he said, voice raw. "I didn't know. I didn't think. I just acted like an idiot." "You acted like someone who forgot kindness," Tessa replied gently. "We all forget it sometimes. Just don't forget again." A tremor crossed Tyler's face, the weight of shame mixed with relief and something like hope. Major Evelyn Shaw, standing behind Archer, crossed her arms. Her posture was sharp, protective, yet she nodded faintly, approving the exchange. Evelyn's own haunted blue eyes softened. She had flown missions with Tessa and saw firsthand how kindness and cruelty shaped a pilot's fate. Caleb looked between Tessa and the students. "Apologizing doesn't erase what happened," he said, "but it's a start." His voice remained steady but firm. "The rest is what you choose to be after today." The boys nodded, even Brett. The Air Force personnel began to relax, the tension unspooling from their shoulders. They weren't here to intimidate children. They were here because one of their own had been disrespected. And now that order had been restored, the air shifted again, becoming gentler. Archer stepped back toward Tessa. "Captain, let us escort you out. You shouldn't have to roll past this mess alone." Tessa hesitated. Her gaze moved to Caleb. Quiet, steady Caleb with sun-tanned skin, wide shoulders, and the haunted gray-blue eyes of a man who had fought too many battles both inside and out. She held his gaze longer than necessary. "I'd like him to walk with me," she said. Archer nodded without question. Caleb swallowed, struck by how easily she said it, how naturally she trusted him in a moment where she had every right to trust no one. He stepped forward, Atlas falling into place beside him. Together, Marine, pilot, and dog, they moved through the hush of the diner toward the exit, leaving behind the remnants of fear, cruelty, and regret. But something else lingered too, the beginning of a story bigger than any of them yet knew. Sometimes the miracle wasn't the rescue. Sometimes the miracle was the second chance. If this chapter touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe, because God's grace often appears in the quietest moments, offering mercy even before we know we need it. The diner's parking lot was quieter now, as if the earth itself had finally exhaled after holding tension too long. The Air Force personnel had already escorted the shaken students out one door and left through another, scattering into trucks and SUVs that hummed away like a convoy of silent guardians returning to their posts. Colonel Archer lingered only long enough to rest a hand on Tessa's shoulder, murmuring something Caleb couldn't hear before he stepped back and gave her privacy. The sun dipped low behind the hill, smearing gold across the asphalt. Caleb Rowan walked beside Tessa Monroe, while Atlas padded between them, his tail relaxed but observant. The mellow confidence of a dog who knew his presence mattered. Caleb's boots crunched on gravel, each step heavy with the aftertaste of adrenaline. He never liked confrontations, but he disliked injustice even more. Tessa rested her fingers on her lap, her posture upright, though clearly drained. The carbon fiber frame of her racing wheelchair gleamed under the evening light. The subtle scratch marks along the side hinting at how much she had lived with, fought through, and refused to surrender to. "Thank you, Caleb," she said softly, "for stepping in. You didn't have to." Caleb shook his head. No one should go through that alone. She smiled, a tired but sincere thing that softened the sharp lines of her face. The faint circles under her blue eyes looked more like bruises earned from holding up a world that rarely held her back. "I'm used to being alone," she said. "Yeah," Caleb replied, rubbing the back of his neck. "Me too." Atlas paused and glanced up at them as if puzzled by their shared loneliness. They reached Caleb's old pickup where the sunset winked off the chipped paint like shy gold. Caleb opened the door for Atlas, but the dog didn't jump in. Instead, he lingered by Tessa's chair, sniffing the air around her, something between curiosity and concern filling his amber-brown eyes. Tessa let out a small laugh. "Your partner's thorough." "He takes his job seriously," Caleb said, though something about Atlas's interest felt more than routine. The dog wasn't just guarding. He was studying her, understanding her. Tessa glanced at her phone, which buzzed in her palm. "It's Archer," she murmured. "He wanted me to call in when things settled." She typed a quick reply, then hesitated before adding, "I should probably let the cadets know I'm okay too." Caleb raised a brow. "Those kids from the university?" "Yeah," she said quietly. "I was supposed to speak at a seminar next week about service, resilience, respect, ironically." She looked down. "I thought I'd cancel, after today." He leaned his arms on the truck door. "Maybe today is why you shouldn't cancel." Tessa glanced up, eyes searching his. "You think anyone will listen?" "Someone always does," he said. Her lips parted, slightly as if that truth caught her off guard. She took a breath. "Would you come with me? To the seminar?" Caleb blinked. "You want me?" "And Atlas," she added, glancing at the dog who now stood proudly like he understood his name was being invoked for a mission. "Why us?" "Because the world listens differently when kindness stands in front of them," she said. "And you did something today most people wouldn't." Caleb's throat tightened unexpectedly. Praise always felt strange, undeserved. "I'm not really a public speaking type." "I'm not asking you to give a speech," Tessa said with a small smile. "Just stand there. Be a reminder that we can still protect each other, that's all." Atlas nudged Caleb's leg as if endorsing the invitation. Caleb chuckled. "You're ganging up on me." Tessa tilted her head. "Is it working?" He hesitated. "Maybe." As evening deepened, Tessa reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small metal band, the kind used for memorial bracelets. Caleb froze. He recognized the shape instantly. She held it out to him, not offering it, not explaining, just letting him see the name engraved on it. A Marine corporal. Killed in Kandahar. Caleb's breath caught. He reached into his own pocket without thinking and pulled out his bracelet. An Air Force medic, killed in the same valley. They looked at each other. Two people who had been on opposite ends of the same sky the same day, carrying wounds that mirrored one another. "That mission," Caleb whispered. "My final deployment." Tessa whispered back. It wasn't just coincidence. It was a thread of fate finely tugged taut. Atlas pressed against both of them, sensing the shift. His ears lowered, his breath slowed, a silent blessing that bound the moment. The quiet between them changed after that. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't painful. It was a kind of recognition, the unspoken kind that sits between survivors who don't need to explain the nightmares they've shared with strangers. Tessa's voice softened. I think maybe we were meant to cross paths today. Caleb exhaled a shaky breath. Yeah, maybe God has a sense of timing. She smiled sadly. Or irony. A light breeze swept through the parking lot, rustling the grass along the curb. A church bell rang faintly from the town square blocks away, as if responding to their conversation. Tessa tucked the bracelet back into her jacket. I'll text you the time for the seminar. If you don't want to go, I'll understand. Caleb nodded. I'll think about it. Atlas barked once, sharply, almost scolding. Tessa laughed. He says he'll think about it too. Caleb shook his head. He's too invested at this point. For the first time since entering the diner, Tessa's face fully relaxed. I'm glad you were there today, she said. Not because I needed saving, but because it feels good to know someone sees me for who I am now, not who I used to be. Caleb absorbed that. For a man who spent years feeling invisible, her words settled gently but deeply. I'm glad you're still flying, he said, even if it's not in the sky anymore. Her breath hitched, and she looked away, flushed, touched, and maybe slightly overwhelmed. He opened her car door for her, locking her brakes in place before helping guide her wheelchair closer. She transferred herself efficiently, trained movements that spoke of discipline and practice. Caleb folded her chair with ease, sliding it into her back seat. Before he could step back, she reached out and touched his wrist. A brief, grounding touch, like she needed the connection before it slipped away. Thank you, Marine, she said. He nodded. Anytime, Captain. Atlas sat between them, tail sweeping the ground. The sun dipped further, painting their silhouettes long and soft across the pavement. For a moment, it looked almost like three shadows woven together. A Marine, a pilot, and a dog who had guarded them both through fates they didn't know they shared. Tessa closed her car door and rolled down the window. I'll see you soon? Caleb swallowed. Yeah, soon. Atlas barked again, gentler this time. She smiled. Good night, Atlas. The engine hummed to life. She backed out slowly, gave a small wave, and disappeared down the road, lined with golden light. Caleb stood there a long time after her taillights vanished. Atlas nudged his hand again, then rested his head against Caleb's thigh the way he used to after missions. Quiet love, steady reassurance. Yeah, boy, Caleb whispered. I think she needs us. Atlas wagged his tail. And maybe we need her too. They stood together as twilight settled over the parking lot, the last light lingering on them like a blessing, three survivors learning to trust the world again, one small miracle at a time. If this journey touched your spirit, please like, comment, and subscribe. Because God brings the right people together at the right time, often in ways we never see coming until the light hits us just right. In the quiet corners of our days, God still moves in ways we don't always recognize. Through the people we meet, the burdens we carry, and the strength we discover when we stand up for one another. Sometimes the miracle isn't a flash of light, but the moment two wounded souls cross paths and choose compassion over silence. If this story reminded you of the grace that can appear in ordinary places, I invite you to share it. Leave a comment. and subscribe to the channel. May the Lord bless you, guide your steps, and surround you and your loved ones with His protection each and every day.